back everyone. Today is the first episode of me getting a gimbal now. Please excuse me because I'm not sure how to use it properly. I've only just got it going. I've had it a few weeks now, but my brother-in-law, who's Daniel, he's much better with this stuff than I am. So he was over for the weekend and I got him to set it up for me. So I'm still working out all the modes and everything, but today I'm just going to do a walk around video of some stuff that we've done here, ways we've kept the whole things going without spending any money, and just a way for me to try and use this thing. So many years ago we got 3 of these, me and my cousin, mate of mine, pretty close with him. We got 3 of these 48 inches. Now they were from a local bloke we knew. I actually brought them home on an old Flintstone like the one, can't see from here, but the company I worked for had an old Mack Flintstone, which was our float truck for many years until we started getting bigger and growing, and they end up getting new trucks. But we brought 3 of these home. Now they were in various stages of rusting away and whatever, but this one's still complete bar the transmission and the diff centre. I've still got all that, but with my knowledge of pedal beating, they're too far gone. It's still got a green diamond in it. I don't know that it spins over. I never even tried. I don't think it would. Make an interesting video, but all those plugs are rusted and all the head bolts are rusted. Got quite a few of these motors in. I think the one that I'm about to show you was the only one we've really had going. The rest are just garden ornaments and sitting around. This one's American. There's 2 Australian models from what I believe. This one's got the steel rims on it, front and back. Just see if they've been sitting here that long. Come into the bush here, but if you can see that wheel there, she's got jewelleys on her, but those are steel wheels, steel rims obviously. I've taken the diff centre out of this, I'll show you why in a minute, and the tail shaft. But this one here, I've got 2 of these, apparently Australian models. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is just what I'm led to believe. But these have got the spider hubs on them, so front and back. Got jewelleys on the back too, but this particular one, it had the same cab and everything as the one I just showed you. Same running gear. They've actually got a 4-speed main, and then they've got a 2-speed diff, so which is manually selected. So they've got 2 gear sticks. You can see that there amongst all the lantana here. But so that second gear stick used to change ratios in your diff. Now this particular one here, we took the cab and everything. It was just, we started doing it up, and I just didn't have the knowledge to finish it. But we ended up selling the cab to a bloke that was going to, he was going to make a rat rod or some sort of thing out of it. So we sold the 2, what was left of the chassis and cabs and bonnets and everything, because I'm not ever going to get one of these going, but we've still got that one there. So we kept what was left and ended up getting it going. About 15 years ago we had it going, but you can see we put an old Holden Commodore radiator in it. Australian built car, that was out of one of those. We had an electric fan, so we had another battery sitting on the front here for the fan, then we had another one for the starter and ignition. So we used to drive it round, but it looks like the rags rotted off the top of the carby. But this is a side valve 6-cylinder Green Diamond International engine. It was running fine. It used to blow a bit of smoke. There was a few stripped head studs and everything on it, but so we'd all sit on her, probably 4 of us. One would steer, one would use the gear stick, one would rev it, and then the other one would hold the snack pack and hand those out when needed. I'll just show you the diffs. I have to excuse the bird life here too. I didn't realise until I played it back last time that you can hardly hear me over the things. There's that many of them. I'll just show you these diffs. I've made a made a tandem drive up out of this thing. Now remember, it's a 48 model, so it didn't come out like this. They still had them in those days, but not this particular one. So what I did, this axle here is out of the truck, the third truck, so they all have the same diffs, the American, Australian ones, whatever model they were, both 2-speed, all the same ratio. So this axle, I took the whole axle out, bolted the spring pack to the chassis of this truck, so they're not load sharing. I haven't got a rocker box there, but I actually took the diff off the spring pack, turned it upside down so you can see down in there, so it focuses. There's a drain plug, that should be on the bottom, so I had to tip it upside down so you could, the tail shaft, you could spin it the other way. Because what I did here, this is the diff centre. You see how long it's been, you look at the size of that tree. That's the diff centre out of the truck I just showed you over the other side there. So I took the back hat off the diff in this truck, and the bolt pattern's the same as the diff centre. So I put the diff centre back to back here, so this pinion on this one runs off the crown wheel of the existing one, which then puts this tail shaft, it'll spin the other way. So that's why I had to put the back axle upside down. Then I've just made this tail shaft up. I just shortened it, bits and pieces I had, so that worked fine, but it has no power divider. So what it is basically now is a 4-wheel drive. Of course, they're not limited slip diffs or anything, but in a straight line, if none of them are slipping, it's 4-wheel drive. So it used to go everywhere when we're driving it. It's flat tyres and everything, but we used to drive it through creeks and up and down hills, and just in low gear, let her idle over while we're having a cold snack. So that's that one. I'll move on and just get out of the bush here. I'm sort of allergic to this privet tree here. I don't want to spend too long around it. This lantana's cutting me. Itchy, but yeah, that's that one. As I said before, probably might do a first start on it one day. See how we go. But probably locked up now. Okay, next one is this Galleon 503 grader. Now, the bloke from work got me onto this. It was at a motocross track. Used to do the tracks out there with it until it blew up. About an hour from here, me and my partner went in there. Craig Kenworth and mine took the flat top and drove the hour, and the bloke lifted on with I think it was a 75-ton cat excavator, but had the desired effect anyway. It was better than trying to lift it ourselves. So this originally had a UD 236 in it, which is an international diesel engine, but they were made from, correct me if I'm wrong here, but they had a gasoline or petrol block. It still had where the distributor mounted. It still had bits and pieces, like it was capped off, but then it had a diesel head on it with obviously an injector pump. But I believe that's why they blew up, because they're only made for the low compression petrols and not obviously diesel's higher compression. So I believe that's why they used to let go. But this particular one threw a rod out through the side of the block, so when we got it, we parked the whole lot next to the workshop, and we just poked the oxy in there and cut the con rod off, and then unbolted the cap off of the crankshaft, and we actually blocked the oil journal in the crankshaft, oil gallery on the crank journal, so it still had pressure. Then we glued a patch over the block, and then we started her up and drove it off. And we used it like that for probably 2 or 3 years, but when I say that, probably 3 or 4 times a year, just to clean the driveway up and whatever we were doing. But then it eventually did it again. It developed a knock, and I didn't even pull it apart to see what the hell. I'd say the same thing happened. So I pulled it out, and I did a job for a bloke. He had a 60 series Land Cruiser, 84 model. It was bought in brand new in 84. This one particular bloke had it the whole time. And the old girl was starting to use oil, but only on long runs around town. It didn't use any. But so we pulled it out, and he got one from an 80 series Toyota Land Cruiser, and we put that into it. And just a bit of an update and got hold of one, but it needed rebuilding anyway. You didn't know at the time, but someone else did that. But and rather than payment, I got the engine off him, which I'd rather than cash. I'd rather parts like this, so I set to work and grafted it into it, because the thing would have just been scrap metal and it wouldn't have been any good. I couldn't find an international motor to fit it. They come out with 353 Detroits as well. It's an SAE 4 bell housing, which Detroit's had, and I got a bell housing because I've got a couple of 453s up in the shed which I would have made fit, but they needed rebuilding and money spent, so I grafted the Toyota into it. Now you can see where in here where I used the international, just try and focus it in here, the bell housing that was on the international motor and the clutch and flywheel off the international. So I've just bolted all that to the Land Cruiser. Now a mate of mine, he worked at a brake shop, they had lathes and milling machines, and I got him to drill after I marked it, got him to drill the flywheel out and machine it to because the crankshaft protrudes a little bit more than the inter did, so I had to machine it down to fit back into it. So he done a great job on that, and the measurements were right, so it just fitted straight together. So after I found centre on the bell housing, the other parts just made it work. But one thing I did have to do was, you see there was a starter mounting cone just, well, you can see where I've cut it off there, but I just welded a bit of plate and used some cast rods, welded a plate over that, just one to cover the hole and two to strengthen it more. But that the starter wouldn't have fit with this oil cooler and everything going on there, so I moved it round to the other side here. I just welded cut a hole in the bell housing, welded the starter cone back on there, which was a bit tricky getting the gear to mesh up, but it works. So this starter in here is the actual one that was on the grader to start with on the intermotor, so that works. So this motor was originally naturally aspirated, and he had a turbo fitted to it after a while, aftermarket turbo kit. You can see it hanging off the side of her. So I just cut the bonnet out here for it to suit the air cleaner, and the exhaust stack comes straight off the turbo. She sounds quite good, got a nice whistle to it, it's not noisy. It's actually very powerful. It doesn't need to be turbo, but it just makes it cool. It just idles away and does the job. So apart from that, all it really needed, hasn't got brakes yet, but that's what the blade's for. Had steel lines going up over the gooseneck here, over the frame. I just got rid of those because stuff used to sit down in there and it just rusted those out. So I got a bloke we use at work to make up however many hoses are there, all the same length, and I made them fit. It doesn't look bad. I'm not restoring it, just so it works. So I think with the brakes, it's got hydraulic ones on each wheel. You can see a bit of I reckon that'd be aftermarket there. Maybe not. The cranky doesn't look aftermarket, but the master cylinder does. But anyway, it's got a tail shaft brake on it here. I was just going to link the pedal up with that because they're quite effective. And it doesn't need a park brake. It's just what the blade's for. I won't start it yet. I will do a start and a drive of it in another episode. But I'll explain it again to people who haven't seen this one. We'll move on. Okay, the next one, again, this is nothing special, but just stuff we've done to make some of this stuff usable, and rather than go to scrap. So this is an Acco butter box, they call them over here. Now you can see I have 4 of these now. There's only 3 here. The other cab is in the shed and the chassis is here somewhere, but I'll explain what's going to happen with those later on. But this one here it's got a 6.354 Perkins in it. It's got a 5-speed Fuller and a 3-speed Spicer 5x3. Truck's a bit of a handful itself, hasn't got a lot of power. I think the motor's completely worn out, but it still does the job. So it was just a cab chassis Actually, the cab in the shed come off this chassis, so I've got the one that's not here. It was a 6-wheeler. It had a 504 V8 Cummins, which is 210 Cummins in it, with had a Allison Auto in it with a, I think, 3-speed Spicer, the same as these. It was bogey drive, had 34 Rockwells in it, full air. So I took, this one had a good cab on it. I took the cab off this and just put all the old bits and pieces back on this so we could still use it. And then I had this tipper body. It was off a D series Ford. Now that had a slant 6 diesel motor in it with a 2-speed diff, and then it must have had a similar box. I think it may have been a Clark 5-speed in it, but the power takeoff on it fitted this. This is a 5-speed fuller. It fitted straight onto this, so that gave it hydraulics. So the tank, the tipper, the hoist, and the control valve I put onto this truck, so we didn't have a tipper at the time. This is, apart from the Flintstone, we still use this one. I just welded a bracket, fairly rough, but it works. A bracket onto the main tipping frame there, and then just a bit of rod in through beside the seat, so you just pull it for up and push it back in for down, so, or whatever way it is. So that works fine. So we just grafted that onto this old girl, and we've moved a lot of dirt with it, like digging out for sheds and whatever we've been doing. The floor's rotten. We just got some corrugated tin in there, but it's just another way of saving a piece of equipment, I suppose. That the D series was smashed up. My dad rode it off. He had a property over the road there and coming down the hill, and she had no brakes at all, so she got away from him. Something happened and he lined her up for a tree because it was heading for the road, and he bailed out and it wrecked it. But we got rid of the chassis, and the bloke bought the engine, and chassis and cab went to scrap, I think, and we kept the body off it for ourselves and the power takeoff. So it's just another thing we've done here to keep making use of this old stuff. Just walking up here. I don't think I've showed any of you this one before, but I've got this little truck. This is the first truck, believe it or not, out of most of this stuff I've got that we had. Now, in the town where I live here, many years ago they had a 100-year celebration parade thing going on. So we built, my grandfather used to have a sawmill in the local area here, but all these trucks were sold and we didn't have any. We just done something to promote it a little bit. We've just got this cab chassis. It come with it. It's a 48 Bedford, which I'm not remotely interested in, to be honest, but it's all we had at the time. So I got the cab chassis off the bloke I knew. It was rusted out. That was my first paint job, and you can see it's still gleaming. I had a bloke sign right it, which we knew. He's since given that up. But an uncle of mine built a tray on it. He done a good job of that. That's sort of why I've kept it for the tray. But, it had no motor in it. I don't know if we got that or the bloke took it, but it had a 6-cylinder petrol in it. But me and my cousin I was telling you about before that done the machining and bought the other truck with, and that we put a 253. Now these V8s are made in Australia, so some of you wouldn't have even heard of these probably. I don't know, but now this is a Holden V8. The first one we put in was a 253 cubic inch. Now we ran it in the parade, but it got hot halfway through. It was just an engine we had. It was pulled out of an old Holden 1-tonner that someone had in. We bought it and put it straight in, but it got hot. Cooked it halfway through the friggin' parade. Didn't have any gauges or anything on it because it was only a short parade. We weren't even worried about it. But anyway, we let it cool down. She still started, and we drove it back home. Wasn't registered or anything. So when that failed, we had this old This is a 308 cubic inch, 308, 5 litre, they call them here. This was out of also a 1 tonner Holden. A cousin of mine used to drive this around, another one. We grafted this into it after the 253 just to keep it going and just so we could run it. It was only sitting on the shelf. It's got an Aussie 4-speed or an M21 in it. It doesn't run now. I don't know why, whether some valves are stuck open or it's out of timing, but we might do another video on that later. So we put this in, we made the mounts and everything. It's got the 4-speed, so we got the 1 tonner tail shaft, and it actually, we cut the yoke off it and off the Bedford tail shaft, and they slid in with a little bit of interference fit, so it was fairly balanced by the time it shoved it into the other one. So we just welded it, and still got the slip joint and everything in, and that works fine, but it didn't do much for the interior. Had these Commodore seats sitting around. See the 4-speed there. Well, we had it, they used to go well. A few bursts we did have with it when we probably weren't meant to. It used to. The 308's got a lot of power. It's a big motor. Like in biggest Australian built V8 as far as I know. If you wanted bigger back then in our Holden produced cars, you went up to the, obviously 307 Chev was the same size, but then you had the 327 and the 350. That was the bigger choice in our Australian cars, but Australian built, this is what we had, so they go quite well, very well. This is only a 2-barrel. It's on this. When it was in the 1 tonner, it had a 650 double pumper, I think, Holly on it, but we just put the 2-barrel manifold back on it and 2-barrel carby. Just they run better. They, you know, what we're doing with it, we weren't racing it. It was more than enough. So there's another one that probably would have been scrapped if it wasn't for doing something with it. I'm still not overly interested in it. I'd like to get the motor going again, but whether we keep it in this or put it in something else, I don't know. It can stay for the time being. If I end up getting the time, we might do a start on it. So I'll move on to the next one. Okay, I'm just up at the shed now. I'm just going to show you that engine out of that grader. Here it is here. It's overgrown, but you can see the diesel head on it. But I was trying to see if we can get in here and show you there's the actual hole in the block. You can see we glued a bit of an old street sign over it there. I'm going to get it to focus in. But you can see here, for those of you who don't know about them, that there was where the distributor should go when they were used in petrol trucks and any cars they may have been in. So whether it was a change over time or they're just using up old parts, or that's how they were designed, I don't know. But anyway, she developed another knock, and I wasn't interested in finding out what it was. So just while we're here, there's one of the 453s there that I could have put in, but it needs rebuilding. And here's the bell housing I got for it here, which is SAE 4. That will fit that bell housing on that grader. So we'll keep going. Okay, the next one out of all these old gems here, we got Fiats, we got Alice Chalmers, Oliver, David Brown, Lance Bulldog, Caterpillar, and 3 inches. But the one I want to show you here, first one anyway, just a couple of modified ones. There's only 2 modified ones here, the rest are standard. But when I say modified, this is only a small job. But we got this one. This was a local farm only up the road. Actually, I think it was there from brand new, from what I believe local bloke saying. But the bloke sold the property and he was moving, and we saw it advertised, so we went up and got it. It's an Oliver 80, obviously petrol, but it was locked up. We took the head off and freed her up. But it's actually got a couple of stripped head studs now. That was before we even tensioned it. Just a couple of threads popped, and anyway, we still run it. But yeah, I think it's popping between a couple of cylinders now. It runs okay, but just every now and then it'll give that sort of a hint. So Now it had a magneto on it. I think it had like a Bakelite gear in it, and to get magnetos fixed around here, unless you know the right person, you're paying big money for it, and I didn't want to do that for it to just sit here. So what I did was I took it off and tried to repair it just by Araldite and stuff like that, which obviously wasn't going to work at the time, but I wanted it to run and just park. So, but that didn't work. So I had a couple of V8 351s here, 302 and a 351 Clevo, which various stages of parts they were pulled down. But so I thought about it for a bit, so I put a V8 distributor on it. Now, made the adaptation plate there. This is off the 302 Cleveland, this one. Got the coil there, just made it all work. So that's obviously it wouldn't have worked with a 3-cylinder or a 6-cylinder. It's got to be either 4 or 8. So you pick up every second one, it's still evenly spaced, so they're evenly timed. So she still tries to throw a spark out of here, an old Bob Clark out of there, but it doesn't go anywhere. So even if it did, it's just a wasted spark. So I just timed her all up, and it starts straight up. As I said, it doesn't run great, but it's not a timing issue. I know what's wrong with it. If it was a timing issue, something wrong there, it wouldn't run at all. It'd just pop and carry on and not work at all. But I reckon it's firing between 2 cylinders because the centre of the head's not pulled down properly. It hasn't got a charging system on it. These old things with magnetos didn't need that. So the wires off the coil, one obviously goes to the points, and then I just run I had to run an earth back here as well, so I just run a twin back to, I just sit a battery, oh sorry for the roughness there, we just sit a battery back here, and like it'll run for ages off without charging. It's only running the coil, so we just put those alligator clips on a battery and either jump on the steer and stick in the front of her, or give her a tow and it'll fire straight up every time. It's been years since it went. But another thing with this one, the front wheels were rotted off it, so the tyres had gone when we got it, which let it sit down in the front, and then it let the mud build up over the rim. So I got a couple of Commodore ones off a bloke that used to work next to a tyre shop. He put some old second-hand tyres on them for me. Then I cut the centre out of the rim, which is the same size as the hub, and you can see same size as the hub there. I think it was a bit tight, so I just spun the wheel and then run like a flapper wheel on a die grinder, and just that was enough to make it fit. And then they just wedge in like a normal truck spider rim. Just got dogs and bolts. So that was one way I've kept this one going without spending any dollars. Needs the back wheels pumping up. One back tyre's completely had it, but it does pump up. It just hits the guard because it's all bulged out even when it comes around with air in it. So the next one here is a Caterpillar D2. Now I got this off a bloke, the company I work for had them sitting up the back of the yard. They got 3 of them, I think. One was going, this one was in parts, had the engine in it, but it was all pulled to bits, and the tracks were frozen on this one. We had to lift it on with the forklift when I first got it, and the engine was that full of water, it had rusted through the liners into the block, and I wasn't near interested in fixing it. So we got the tracks freed up, and then what I did, that cousin of mine, I've been telling you about him, and I used to do all these sorts of things. We'd repower everything that wouldn't go. So this one here, we made a chassis up, took the cat motor out, but it had a pony motor, a pilot motor and everything on it. But we made this chassis up, so we bolted a ring around the bell housing there, then we made some rails to support the motor and the radiator, and then our equaliser bar, which is a spring pack on these, we just welded a boss to that, and then the bolt come up through it just like it normally would when it was on the other machines, on the other sump, I guess, on the main original engine. But this here is another Holden motor. Now this belongs to the same, like the one I just showed you in that little Bedford truck. Now this is a 6-cylinder 202, so it's 3.3 litre, 202 cubic inches, which is another Australian built motor. These come out as grey motors to start with in the early cars. I think they were 138, and then they went to 149, which were red, 161, 173, 186, and then 202. And now when they got to 202, I think in a couple of other sizes, first went to blue, which were a pollution motor. They were called 3.3, but they were the same, just pretty much a red motor with pollution stuff on it. And then they went to black, and then the black ones, I think blue as well, you could get fuel injection, you could get carburetor. They were just later model versions of this one, and then they went to Nissan and Buick and whatever else they did after that. So these were just known as the red motor in Australia here. But this one had a 4-speed on it. It's still got the flywheel and clutch. So the way I made this work, the flywheel and clutch is obviously still original, but I pulled the main shaft out of a 4-speed that was here. It had a tooth off it somewhere, so it was rat bait. They were M20 in the 6 cylinders and M21 in the V8. So I got the shaft out of the M20, and then I found that's the centre out of a funny looking wheel thing here. You can see there's a centre out of a Dodge clutch. Now I had a heavy duty 318 Dodge motor out of a little forward control truck, and there it is there. There's that, actually, well, there's that 253 out of that Bedford, the one we cooked. It's under there, but I got the clutch out of this Dodge, and the centre of it fitted over the Caterpillar spline. So I've just, tacked it so it was running straight, and then ended up getting it straight as I could and welded it. It's still not perfect, but it works. Welded it up so that just made it like a dog shaft, little link shaft between the Holden clutch and the Caterpillar input shaft. So your actual hand clutch on your Cat is just linked to that, and then it releases your Holden clutch. It's not over centre, you just got to hold weight on it like you would with your foot in any car. But it works good. This engine has got a miss in it now. The first problem I found with it had a lobe off the mother stick, so she wasn't lifting one of the, I don't know, it was an inlet exhaust valve, what it was, on one of the cylinders. So that was just I thought, hello, we found the problem here. So we put another mother stick into her, and then it's still got a miss. So all the valves are fine. I don't know if the shaft in the Dizzy's bent. I've had leads and plugs on it, a cap. I don't know if the shaft on the distributor's bent, so she's only hitting 5 of them or whatever the case is, but I haven't looked any further. That was when it didn't work then, and we had a little bit more of a fiddle, then we just put her away. But it wouldn't take much to find. It's not priority. Before any of you Cat blokes, a lot of Cat enthusiasts had said I've ruined it and everything, but fact is it was either going to sit there and go to scrap, or maybe someone else with more money than me could have got hold of it, or we repair it with something and make it half work. And I like modified things because there's still a lot of these around here in Australia, going to shows and stuff, and this sort of makes this one unique. But if we're ever to convert it back to a Cat engine, nothing's been changed, so everything I've done will unbolt. I haven't modified the machine in any way that it can't be. Everything I've done will just unbolt, and you can slip the Cat motor straight back into it. So that's that's the story with this one. It's not ruined. If someone did get hold of it and you could put a Cat motor straight back into it. It's not wrecked at all. I think that's really it. I mean, the old white there it's got a 671 in it. When I bought it, the motor was, whoever had it got the motor that hot, it had burnt the paint even off the bonnet, so it was completely shot. I had an auto car with a 671 in it, which that was another way I've kept the white going. I took it out of the auto car and put the bell housing and everything off the original white and the transmission back in onto that motor, and kept this one going too. So that's another one we've done there. You can see the bonnet off the old auto car. And Paul, if you're watching, you remember driving this, mate. Wombat out there, bloke used to drive it in a company we used to work for. There's that old Roadrunner, mate, you were talking about. I don't know if you can see good on this camera or not, but I'd zoom in, but I don't know how at the moment. That's off it. I've still got the grill off that, and the other side panel. No, it didn't. Only had one on it. I think it was a wreck. Like, for me to pull something apart and get rid of it, it's shot. Like, kept a few bits and pieces off it. I got the transmission out of it still, but the rest of it I gave to a bloke that was doing one up. I think he used a few parts off it, but it was from carting leachate and pumping out of tips and stuff all the time. It had it pumping out of dams full of stuff, full of mineral and high in salt and all that sort of thing. It just rotted the thing away to a state where I didn't want it. I just wanted parts, so that kept the old white going. And the transmission off it's still up on the shelf here somewhere. Yeah, up there. You see the old. It was a 10-speed overdrive. There's another 308 cubic inch red motor there. Probably do a start on it one day. And this one here, the cab was shot on it when I got it, so I end up getting another cab for it. It's just another way we've kept that one going too. So apart from other bits and pieces I added to it, but that's, yeah, I'll go and show you that cab before we finish this video up. It's another way we've done that one too. So that cab was complete bar the interior, so we put the interior out of the haddock cab, and another stretch cab one we bought just for parts. We put the seat and the trims and everything out of that into this one. So before I go, I'll just show you that cab, and I think that's really, there's lots of other stuff around here. They're the main ones we've fiddled with to keep going. I'd rather than, I don't really restore anything. I wouldn't modify anything, but it's just ways of keeping it going with parts you have laying around. Another one here is a electric car I got off the local wildlife sanctuary thing I do some work for. They were going to throw it out, and I wasn't agreeing with that at all, but it's electric. It was, and I think a battery pack for this thing was going to be upwards of $1,800 at the time. I bought a couple of 70 amp hours. It's 36 volts, so 3 of those, sorry, and 3 cheap chargers, and it worked okay. It had a lot of power, but it just only lasted 20 minutes or something like that, and the kids used to race around in it, but it'd always go flat down the back, so you're forever towing it back, and there's the sling on it still. So I took that out, took the electric motor out, and I put a Chinese Honda in it. It's just off eBay. I think it's a 6.5 horsepower, 6 horsepower or something. It's electric start, and I think I paid $190 or something for it. So I put the starter up here, just lengthened it with some 7-core, and put the starter key there. Put the choke up here, and just leave the fuel on. Doesn't matter. It's mounted off the diff, not the chassis. So when the diff moves on the spring packs, the chains stay in the same tension all the time, and still running true. It's got a. I'll try and get around there and show you. I have put this on the channel before, but for those who haven't seen it, this is just a bit of a modification things we've done here episodes. I'll add it. Put a torque converter with forward and reverse on there. CVT transmission. And then I pulled the shaft out of the electric motor. Sorry for that, had to squeeze past here. Pulled the shaft out of the electric motor, if you can focus it in under there in the dark, but in there, so you see the chain and the shaft, and then a support bearing there, so that's a centre out of the motor, as I said, and then I just put a small sprocket on it and then the chain straight to it off this torque converter. It hasn't got a lot of power. A 9 or a 13 would have made it pretty much ideal, but they were a lot dearer. It still works. It's pretty slow, but hasn't got a lot of power. With the kids on it, it's fine. The dog sits on the back seat and they drive it round, and as I said about everything else, it would have just sat around, and I wasn't spending that money on batteries, I can tell you right now. So just another, I think it might have been 300 bucks all up. I still use one of the batteries, so they weren't a complete waste of time. Pretty cheap car, got it for nothing, so 300 bucks. I was keen to spend that to keep it going. There's the old cab off the Blue Kenworth, I'm just showing you. We started doing her up and all the floor is broken out of it, and you need like got huck rivets in those, and I didn't have the proper gun. Some are pop rivets where you can't get behind them, but mostly you need the proper tooling for Kenworth rivets. I didn't have that, and as I said, I didn't restore it. I was fixing it up so I could use it. So you know, that you can see how far we started going with it until we realised it wasn't wasting our time. We just didn't have the tooling to keep going with it. So you can see up there how loose some of the rivets were, and it'd just be a never-ending story for the time we had. So we've done something else with it. That's the story there. So they're most of the modifications we've done here to keep things going. I'll just show you quickly before I cut this out as well. I was just showing you the red motor in the D2 up there, but I've also got the other variants in here, the 6-cylinder ones. These are both 3.3 or 202 tubes. You can see in here, that's a blue one I was talking about. They're pretty much identical, with different ports in the head and stuff like that. The block's the same. The pollution on it, that was in the later sort of 82, 84 cars. And then here, got the black version too. This is out of a mate of mine. He's doing up a Commodore. He's going to put a later model V8 in it. But this is the black. I'm not going to pull all that grass away, but you get the idea. There's the black. Still carburetted, but it's, you know, out of higher pollution again than the blue one. So electronic ignition, bits and pieces like that. Actually, I think the blue one had electronic ignition too, but yeah. So there's a few different examples of Australian-made 6-cylinder Holdens. Had grey, red, blue, then black, and if there was anything else, I'm not aware of it. But so I'm going to wrap this video up here, and if you've made it through all my waffle, please share. If you like it, please subscribe, click the thumbs up, because that all helps me grow. So I'm trying to get it as big an audience as I can, and obviously enjoying doing it, but if I can grow it, that's more the better. Thanks very much for watching.